I want to introduce my co-panelist today. She is a dear old friend we met in grad school. This is Holly. She is one of the consultants at Signet, and she is one of our superstars at Signet that does everything. So she is an ACE test prep tutor. She's an excellent executive function coach. She can tutor in almost any humanities subject. And of course, she also does college admissions, and her students that she works with get amazing results. And we're always so impressed at what a great fit these students end up at, whether it is an Ivy League institution or a regional college that no one's really heard about, but it is so the perfect sweet spot for that kid. So Holly's got a wide range of talents and perspectives, and I'm really excited for her to join us today to talk about college visits. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you, Sheila.
Here we go. Okay, this is one of those things that I'm always a little confused by when parents talk to me about it, because sometimes they're visiting because they know they have to visit, but not because they want to see a particular school and see if it's a fit for their student, or they want to explore a certain area of the country. There's no real goal behind the visit beyond saying, check, we did our college visits. And so we see parents, we're working with a student building their college list, and then the parent calls and says, we're going on college visits to, these 7 schools, and they're not schools that we've even been talking about. So there's a real disconnect sometimes between the entire college application process and where a visit fits in, how it can be helpful both to you and your student's candidacy. So we're hoping to really bridge that gap today and clarify how you can really get the most out of these visits at different stages in the process. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to dive in here. And well, this is where we started. We really want to make sure we're using these visits strategically. And Holly is going to tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Um, so as Sheila mentioned, sometimes college visits, it's on the to-do list and people will do them just because they feel like they need to, or everyone around them is doing them. And I think it's so important to really reflect on what you're trying to get out of the visits and at what point in the college journey you're doing that, with the application journey. So one of the biggest things in visiting colleges is to help clarify preferences. I've often found when I start working with students, especially in freshman, sophomore year, their ideas about what college is and what their life will look like tend to be pretty vague, or they're influenced by what they've heard about other people or their parents' own college experience. It has very little personal connection to them. And I think college visits are one of the best ways for them to start understanding what their preferences are and what's going to be the environments that they really thrive in. Because sometimes they just haven't thought about it. How important is it that there's a gym close by that they can go to that they're excited to go to regularly? And how much of an impact will that have on their well-being, and structuring their day? For me, a dining hall is really central. I love to eat. I love to share meals. It was really important for me to gather with other people and have that be a regular part of my life. And sometimes you don't realize it until you're looking at schools, what an influence that has. So the idea is that, going early and exposing your kids to different types of campuses can really help them start to zero in on what they actually care about and why. Uh, Next, in a more strategic sense, when you're applying to colleges, some colleges do track your engagement with them. They track, whether you visit campus, they may track whether you're doing online tours, times that you interact with admissions officers. So going on a visit can be important for demonstrating interest when you're applying to a college. Some colleges track this, some really care about it, and some do not. So that's one thing to, when you're doing your research in the college list, to clarify, so as part of your research strategy that turns into your application strategy, whether you need to be drawing attention to the ways that you're visiting colleges, and interacting with schools. And finally, when we get to the actual applying, it is so vital that students understand why they're a good match for a school and why that school is a good match for them. And often they're going to have to articulate that pretty directly in a supplemental essay for many of their schools. And students who have had a focused visit and really have gained not only an insight about what that college has to offer, but how that is different from what so many other colleges have to offer, they're going to be in an excellent position to be able to write a convincing essay that's believable and true about why they're a perfect fit for the school.
Thank you, Holly. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've struggled with a student to get them to say something more than the campus is pretty in those essays. And when they have had, a great interaction with their tour guide or a random student that they met when they visited, or when they can talk about, when they peered into the biolab building, they were just so like excited. They could see themselves doing that research there. It really makes for a compelling essay, and that's the stuff that a college admissions officer is going to remember and see as a sign that this student is a great fit at the school. So now you know why visits matter. I mean, there are many other benefits to visits, but those are the three we really want you to remember. And here's another list of three that I want you to be thinking about. We think about three types of college visits, and these may be happening at different times over the course of applying to college. And when we talk about the college process, that really starts in ninth grade. It's not that you necessarily have to do anything specific to communicate with a college, but everything that you do in high school from ninth grade on is going to be represented in your college application. So we want people to be intentional from the start, right? So there are three types of visits you may do over the course of that process. And we're going to go into detail in the next couple of slides here. But we first have our Fit Finder, where you're just kind of trying to get the lay of the land. What does a campus look like? What does a big campus look like, or a small campus, that kind of thing? And these can absolutely be done with younger children. It can actually be really beneficial to start getting that on their radar. Then we have the test drive, and these are usually done in 11th grade as you get clearer on where specifically you want to apply. Fit Finder could be any random school. The test drive, you are really seriously thinking about these schools. So they're much more prioritized and well researched. So there are specific things we encourage you to do on those kinds of tours. And then there's the gut check, which is going to happen after you're accepted to make that final decision of where is the student actually going to go for the next 4 years of their lives. So I'll turn it back over to Holly to take us through a couple of these types.
All right. So the Fit Finder, as Sheila mentioned, this can start early, even earlier than seventh grade, right? Like if you have a younger student tagging along for college visits, exposure is great. And the purpose of this really is to start to understand the college preferences and what sort of environment your student's going to thrive in. So what we emphasize here is that they're rather general. If you're looking at, if you're curious if a larger school in a like urban environment is a good fit, it doesn't have to be the top choice that you have in that category. It can be something convenient, something that's low stakes, but will demonstrate to a student what it feels like to feel like you're in the middle of a city when you're walking between your classes. So that's what we emphasize here is that it's less about hunting down the match, the one. There is no the one yet, most likely. That's something that's going to develop with time and open-mindedness. But this is one that will clarify things. So we recommend, just to throw out a number, like 4 to 5 different campuses. And different is the key word here. So even if your kid seems dead set on, big school, try and take the time to visit a small liberal arts campus and see what it looks like. So it can be based on campus size. That makes a big difference in a lot of ways, which is why that's often one of the first things we talk about in campus choice. Consider those locations. How far away is it? How like isolated? Is it easily accessible? Is it right in the middle of a city, or does it have a very separate campus feel? To start to get a sense of how that quality appears in schools. And you can start getting familiar with what college tours are like. If you go on a formal tour, it doesn't always have to be that formal, but that lowers the stakes once you get into the next step that is much more focused. So again, I'd say here, like have conversations, debrief, keep it casual, but you can take some notes too. It's really useful to see what's changed and what hasn't over the years when you do this. And often it helps if you can be the keeper of those things. So I'd suggest, yeah, if you can open up some notes or a document that you can refer back to, it can really serve you well in a few years if you're at this stage.
That's a really good point, Holly. I like to bring up, and this has been on my LinkedIn last couple of weeks, if you guys follow me. My dad did this. I don't think he knew what he was doing, but he did this. And he would travel for a conference. He would take the whole family. And if there was a college nearby, usually there was because it's a conference, we would see that college. We would do an official tour. He would make us talk to students. I have an older brother. We both cringed so hard. We were both so mortified and embarrassed. But he and my mom marched us around all of these college campuses across the country. And I think it really helped us develop, as Holly has said, the language for what's relevant in college. What are the things that people do? How are these things laid out? And what do we kind of like? Where do we feel more comfortable? Where don't we feel more comfortable? And we'll talk about this as we go forward. But there were cases where I felt like I got enough of an impression of a school, and my parents took so many pictures that I didn't feel like we needed to visit again, even if it was a school that I thought I was going to apply to. Like, we could save a little time and a little money not visiting again because we had the impression. Oh, Lisa has a good question. At this Fit Finder stage, do you schedule a tour or just show up and walk around? What do you think, Holly?
If you're able to get in one, I think it's worthwhile. It doesn't have to be for every school at this stage, but I think it's useful to start getting comfortable with taking tours.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think you're also going to have to decide based on how old your kid is. Like, you may really be excited about it, but your 5-year-old might not be. And they're, not going to be paying attention, and you're going to be running after them or whatever. So, spend your goodwill with your kids carefully if you're on vacation. But you can also do these at, whatever college is within half an hour of your house. So maybe you can go back if you wanted to do the official tour at some point. Great question. All right, let's keep going.
All right. So when you're getting into junior year, things are getting more serious. This is when usually we're thinking about developing at least the first draft of the list, starting to hone it and finalize it. That's when we recommend taking test drive visits. So these are the focused visits that are coming from research. Right. You've looked into the school, you've looked into the academic programs. Hopefully your kid has done a lot of that work as well, and is invested in this. So you'll have a sense of, what you feel like is going to be a good fit about the school, what questions you have or any concerns, and you're going in there on a mission. Um, so I recommend, even though, sometimes it can take a little extra scheduling, to go when classes are in session and to take a look at the academic calendar for the school. If you go right in the midst of finals week, it may be a little different vibe that's not indicative of the entire school year. So take a look at the academic calendar and get a sense of where you're arriving within it, and use that to contextualize the visit. But also, I really recommend that because college is about other students. A lot of it is, right? It's like, who are your friends going to be? How excited are they to learn? What are classes like? How what is the basic environment, right? College is not just buildings. So it's great to be able to do that when classes are in session, and that gives you a sense of how busy the campus is, what the traffic's like, how lively the town is near it. All of those things would make you'd have a better, more accurate impression if you go when classes are in session. Um, so a couple recommendations we have about this. When you're there and you're investing the time to get there, go beyond the tour. Uh, get nosy. Sheila has some stories about this. It's not it's not the time to worry about people judging you for being nosy, saying the wrong thing, asking too many questions. This is your time to do that, and you should feel empowered to do so. So see if you can arrange to attend classes, look at events that are on campus, explore around the campus, see how accessible it would be. If your student can have a car or not, can they get to what's accessible to them, and have them think through what that would look like for their first year. Obviously, we're asking for more investment in a visit than you may have thought of, and so it makes sense to do fewer of them. I think that 5 or 6, depending on how many schools from your Fit Finder are now in your list. You should prioritize schools that value demonstrated interest. And that information is available, and you can find out based on the schools which ones care about this. So going on a tour, an official tour, making yourself known to the admissions office is very strategic. If you're considering applying, if your kid's considering applying, early decision, which is binding, that it can give you an advantage at some schools. So can be a great option, but it's a really big decision to make very early. So it's worthwhile to have a very serious visit where you're really able to compare your options, and you can make a I would say a very well-informed choice that you're going to feel good about. Um, Group tours geographically if you can, make it easy on yourself. If you're going in one area of the country that seems very appealing, you can look at other schools as well. It's a nice way to expand if you're looking to expand your list, especially into targets and likelies or safeties. You can do that geographically. And finally, remember that it's an option to visit after applying. If you have every indication that it would be a good fit, but it's not that convenient to visit and they don't track demonstrated interest, why not wait until you see if you get in and where that lands on your priorities before you make that big investment?
I don't know why it's always so hard for me to find the unmute button. But thank you for bearing with me that I'm not coming off mute right when you're done. All great points here, Holly. And I really want to emphasize that thing that you said about this is not the time to be embarrassed about asking too many questions. Your kid will be embarrassed that you are asking so many questions, but you should not feel embarrassed. I mean, let's be, really real about this. College is a huge investment. It's like buying a house, but we don't do the same level of due diligence and inspection and kicking the tires that we do when we're buying a house. We go by, what someone else told us. This college is a good college, right? There's a great book if you're interested in really figuring out what questions to ask. There's a great book on this called The Price You Pay for College. It's by a journalist named Ron Lieber. And it has so many questions in there. I mean, your visit would take I don't know, probably 10 hours per school if you were to ask all of the questions, but that's how thorough, you really need to be when you're doing this. And I also don't want you to think that this is the only advice we're leaving you with. We do have some material prepared for you that you'll get after the webinar is done with the recording, probably tomorrow. It has a worksheet to help you determine campus preferences. We call that the Campus Compass. It has a checklist that you can take with you on a visit and helps you know what to do before and during and after a visit. And it comes also with our really comprehensive admissions organizer, which has timelines, a research template, an essay organizer, an activity list template. It's really very, very comprehensive and easy to use. And every student at Signet has one of these, and it's sort of like our guidebook for how are we moving through the process. So you're going to get all that for free. Just know that it's coming after we're done here. I want to pause for a second and take some questions. We got some really good things here. Sandy in the car asks, what if your student doesn't know what they want to study? How do you begin to research a school on academics then? And I will point out, we do have another webinar that we did couple months ago on building the college list. So you could go to our events page on our website and get the recording of that. But I'll answer a little bit. And then Holly, I'm curious if you want to chime in. It's fine if your student doesn't know what they want to study. Most colleges, you don't have to know until the end of your second year. If they're truly undecided, like it could be anything under the sun, then you really want to look for a college that has really great kind of core curriculum that's going to expose them to a lot, that has good career advising so that they can figure that out in the course of college, right? If they have some idea, like they're pretty sure it's going to be in the sciences, well, then you want to look through the departments, the majors that they offer within the science, and see what resonates with your student right now, right? And that's actually one of the things that we do on that research template that you're going to get. I have my students write down every major that seems interesting to them at whatever school it is. And as they do this research, it starts to become clear what they're interested in, right? I have a student right now who told me she was really interested in biochemistry, but in all the research, she's looking at environmental science first. And I pointed that out to her and she's like, huh, you're right. Maybe I do like environmental science. So now we're exploring that a little bit more deeply, right? So the process of research in colleges can also help them get clear on, what it is, what path they want to take. Holly, what do you want to add?
Um, yeah, if you feel like your kid might change their mind often or might struggle to zero in on a major, I think taking a look at the advising, what the structure is, and you can ask specific questions as well, like in your tour, or try and find information. How many students do first year advisors have? Are they, faculty members or are these professional advisors on staff? Different schools will have different structures for that, because if a student isn't left with clear advising, sometimes the degree will take longer if they declare a major a little later. It will have implications on their path, and some schools are just more well equipped to handle delaying a major because the structure of the curricula allows for people to complete most of most requirements within 2 years. So I would say definitely pay attention to that feature, which is more important the less a student knows about what they want to do. Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
Thank you. Lisa has a great question about athletics that I think we should save to the end. So Lisa, we'll come back to that question, but thank you for asking it. All right, so that's the test drive. You've got resources and tools coming, and of course we can come back to this at the end when we move to questions. But I want to talk about the last kind of visit that we've presented to you. We call this the gut check. You've gotten in, maybe you have 3, 4 choices. Maybe you're one of the lucky students that has like 10 choices. Hopefully you can narrow those to maybe just 1 or 2, maybe 2 or 3. And then at that point, visiting again can help that student really confirm their decision and feel good about their next steps. Sometimes this might be, a visit at a random date that is convenient for you, and you're just maybe not going on a tour, but you're kind of looking at different things because now you're in. But a lot of the times this will come in the form of an admitted student's day or weekend. And most colleges have more than one of those, right? So they realize not everyone can come on April 14th. So they'll do it on the 7th and the 14th and the 21st, right? So you have some options. But on that gut check visit, you really want to revisit the first impressions. What was it that initially drew you to this school? Are those preferences still relevant to you? Sometimes when you're writing the essays, you realize, oh, actually, I like this other thing better than what I thought I did in the first place, right? And now that you're in, and this could be a place you move to for the next 4 years, is this really where you want to be? We want students to engage again and more, right? Again, I said you might not go on a tour, but you do want to check out really specific things like career services. If you didn't check it out on your first visit, or if you hadn't done much research, stop in and see what that advising looks like, what kind of services they offer, how often students actually go to them, what kind of success rates they have, what kind of relationships they have with different industries or different companies. Do they proactively help students find internships, or do they just give them a login to a platform and the student has to do all the work on their own, right? Really understand what they offer and who your kid is, because maybe the login to the platform is just what your kid needs. But, we all know there are some kids who just need a little bit more, right? So think about that. Think about student life, right? Hopefully your student has thought a little bit about the kinds of activities or clubs they want to be a part of in college. But now that they're in, there's a chance to kind of take a deeper look and see what the students there do for fun, and if that's really what they want to do, and if these are the people that they want to, pursue their common interests with. And then overall, it's a reality check, right? In addition to like, what does my life look like day to day on this campus? You also want to think about, what did it take to get there? What does it take to leave campus? How far away from home is it? Is it in a different time zone? What is that going to do to your communication with, friends back home, the long distance boyfriend or girlfriend, or parents, right? You want to hear from your kids too. So like, what are those realities that you really need to think about as, you're preparing to make this decision? And then at the end of the day, you really want to trust your instincts. I literally, right before this webinar, had a call with a student who I had worked with this fall, and he's gotten into some great schools. And his parents reached out to me last week, and they're like, okay, it's between these two. Which one's better for a pre-med? And they were on their way to visit one of the schools that they hadn't visited before. So I was like, okay, go visit that school. We'll talk when you get back. And immediately, I got on the call, and this kid was like, it's UC Santa Barbara, not UC San Diego. Like, doesn't even matter what the options are. Just the vibe was right. The people were right. And I was like, okay, we don't even have anything to talk about. I did help him feel a little better about what kind of advising he was going to get and how proactive he was going to need to be. But that's nothing to worry about right now. You can think about that, how to prepare to take full advantage of the campus over the summer before you get there. But I really encouraged him to just listen to his gut. He's done the research. He's done the visits. He's met the people, and your body is telling you something that you should listen to, right? We can put our brain on pause for just a second and go with our hearts, because, you've done all the research work, right? Now it's really time for your student to think about where they belong. All right. We have some advice. We have some advice for everybody. I'll go through this a little bit quickly, and then we have some specific advice for parents. So, as I was just saying, you got to trust your senses. Now, your senses are important, but at the end of the day, your kids' senses are a little bit more important. This is their life, their college experience. They're going to have to live with these people. But you can also think about who your kids' friends are right now, and if they seem like the people that you see on this campus seem like the kind of people your child would be friends with, if they're the kind of people who are going to help your kid grow in all the right ways, you can be paying attention to all of those things as well. Holly pointed this out when we were preparing these slides, that sometimes kids get really hung up on a totally temporary circumstance. Like, it's raining that day, that campus sucked. Or maybe they were sick, and so going on the tour was just really a slog, and that colored all of their impressions, right? Now, those are temporary circumstances that are not necessarily true of, the whole year, unless it's like a really rainy place. It's like raining all the time, right? So if it's temporary, try to reserve judgment, try to help your child see like, hey, this is how you're feeling that day, or this is what the weather was that day. But is it really going to be like that all the time? Probably not, right? You do want to make it official. There was sort of a question about this earlier as well. A lot of these schools track demonstrated interest, so you do want to sign up for an official visit, which you can do on the admissions website. Now, sometimes those fill up because there are so many people who want to see it, or they're just tourists that, are going to see that school, and there's no spot on the tour. What you can do is still go to the campus, but stop in at the admissions office or send them an email to say, hey, I know we couldn't get on the tour, but we're going to be here on this date. Would it be possible for us to meet with a student, or sit in on a class, or, something else, really, even if you can't get on that tour? So don't try to be like sneaky and just go incognito. Like, make sure they know you're there. You'll be surprised at how accommodating they can be. And then this last one I think is really important, and it really freaks people out sometimes to think, oh, I'm going to go visit this college, and I really love this college, and I hope they like me, and I hope I don't like put my foot in my mouth, or like trip and fall and make a big scene. Those things are probably not going to happen, but also your tour guide does not care, Your tour guide is not like, oh, this kid is not getting in. They're not evaluating you on the tour. Now, you could do something really terrible, like start a fight, punch a professor or something, and that will probably make it into the record. But, if you're not being controversial or aggressive, they're not evaluating you. They are actually there to try to convince you of a certain impression of the school. They are trying to sell to you. So don't worry so much about asking like the best question or impressing people. You're really there to exert some of your own agency and power to say, hey, this is what I want for my kid, or for your kid to say, this is what I want for my life, and really ask the question if that school is going to help them get there. Holly, would you add anything here?
No, I think that sounds great. And I have more coming up.
Yeah,
So
here we go.
yeah, there we go. So this advice, these are tips particularly for parents, knowing that you're often doing so much of the logistical work and the financial work, organizing these visits, that sometimes it can be hard to make sure that it is about the student's experience and them imagining what it will be like to be on campus. So some advice that we have about how you can be the most helpful to them are, number one, to check your pass at the door. You may feel very nostalgic when you go on these tours. You may visit your alma mater and have really strong opinions about it, or you may have sort of negative opinions because this seems like different from what you really liked about college. I find it really helpful to just take time and like do a little temperature check and see how you're feeling about schools, and see if you can try to let your kid make their own impression first, and then be there for debriefing, for asking questions, getting them, teasing out their ideas, but trying not to make that first feeling or impression something that comes directly from you. Because there's plenty of time that you have to talk with them about these ideas, but I think it's so informative to see when they're coming up with their own feelings and impressions there. uh, Something that well, I'll skip to the ask provocative questions. It One of the more helpful things that you can do is draw out through discussion the impressions that your kid will have when they're doing the college visit. Often, until things are said out loud, it might not come into complete awareness, and it might not, come into memory and sit there. So I think asking, what did you hate about this school? Well, this seemed actually similar to that one. What was the difference that made you really dislike this? It's not badgering them, maybe feel like that a little bit, but the idea is to get them to articulate, and then for you to maybe write down or take note of, like, what are these distinguishing characteristics in their impressions, which leads to the next one, documenting those things. If you can document the visits, answers to questions that you have, and the impressions, like the really strong impressions that your kid has, that can be of tremendous use to them. It may be annoying at first and have your camera out the whole time, but when it comes down to applying to this many schools and writing those essays and trying to articulate what exactly the spirit of the campus was that drew you to it, having those resources will be a huge benefit, and they will thank you for it. So feel free to help that, like, for that to be the role, that you're receiving information and impressions and asking questions during that process, and then processing your own feelings and offering advice can come later as well. I really love I'll say long-term documenting these things. It can be so helpful because, you know, students' preferences can change. We say listen to your gut, pay attention to the vibes. That's great. But what's really important is to see long-term what real values and preferences are true and deep and are likely to remain there for 5 years. It'll be a whole year before your kid is on campus, and then a lot longer that they'll be in school. So the longer you're taking note and keeping track of these ideas and preferences, the easier it will be for you and them to see which ones have stood the test of time. So finding a kind of durable long-term note-taking system will be a big help. And then finally, it's it can be so fun to like visit dream schools because they're beautiful. Often they're, in great locations, and they're the first ones we might think of, right? But if you start from the top, if you start with schools that are far reaches or likely to be, the top choice immediately, it's going to create a sense of dissatisfaction that will kind of permeate visits after that. And what we really want in a balanced college list is that a positive sense that all of those on this list have something amazing to offer, and that each of these life paths that these schools offer have tremendous possibility. So it's a lot easier to do that and have that mindset if you start with schools that are really comfortably within a range for your student. They can yeah, they can start with an open mind and it will be really exciting. Like what college has to offer students is incredible. But if it get a little spoiled looking at, the very tippy top, it might be harder for them to keep an open mind when finding their safety schools.
That's such a great point. We meet families all the time that have visited all the Ivy League schools and they're like, we don't know how to choose targets or safeties. And, there are plenty of great target and safety schools for their student. It's just that their standards are so high that nothing is going to meet them. Right. And that's the trap that a lot of people fall into. It's very easy to pick out the reach schools, right? But it is a lot harder to find the right target and safety schools that will really provide the right environment for your student. The only difference between these is that they have different acceptance rates. They're different in terms of their selectivity, but they should still offer, the great biology program or the co-op that, system that your student really loves, or be in that area of the country and be that size that they've decided that they're really comfortable with. So I just think this is the thing that every parent really needs to hear is like, don't start with the fancy ones. Start with the other less fancy ones, and really think about what does the school have to offer, and then work your way up your list. Okay. Let's get through. We only have a few more slides and then we'll move back to questions. I do want to talk about when you can't travel. And that might be because your budget is limited or your time is limited. Both of those things are very real. And colleges are very understanding about this. They're not going to like ding you for not actually visiting if they track demonstrated interest. There are other ways to demonstrate your interest. So I kind of got two columns here. First column is other ways to demonstrate interest, and there are lots more, but these are the big ones. You could attend local or virtual info sessions. Now, almost every college does a virtual info session now. Sometimes it's like pre-recorded and you just put your email in and then you have access to it. So they know that you have expressed that interest, that you're going to watch this virtual info session. A lot of the times the admissions reps will travel either to your school or they'll team up with a couple of other reps from other schools and they'll host an event in your town or a neighboring town where there are like 6 schools that you can meet. And then of course there are college fairs as well, where you might find 100 different colleges that you could talk to. And they all will have a sign-up sheet or a QR code for you to scan and get on their mailing list, right? And that mailing list, you're going to get tons of junk mail. You're going to get a lot of spam. There are some schools that when they track demonstrated interest, they check the open rate, right? Have you opened all of our emails? You don't need to be like too crazy about this, but if it's a school you really care about and you're on their mailing list, you should open those emails. And those mailing lists, their newsletters are a great place to learn about some of those local sessions that come. You can also contact the admissions office to say, hey, you should have your student do this, or maybe you can help them. I'm a student interested in studying comparative literature, and I really want to understand, what that major is like. Could you put me in touch with a student who's a current major? And they will be happy to do that for you, and they'll register your interest, and they will connect you to a student who can really give your kid that perspective that they're seeking. So don't be shy about that. And there are times where we'll encourage a student to ask via email a very specific question about how a program works, or whatever, because we want to make sure they're demonstrating that interest at a detailed level with like a question that can't be asked or can't be answered just by looking at the website, right? So sometimes there's some strategy involved in that as well. Um, and then if your goal is to really understand the vibe of the school, there are lots of ways to do that too, right? Connecting with a current or a former student, maybe you know someone who went there. Again, you can talk to the admissions office to find out, to get in touch with a current student, can be really, really helpful for students. Like teenagers listen to other teenagers more than they listen to adults. So that's a really great strategy. There's a lot of social media content. There's official content that's created by the admissions office, which can be really useful. A lot of these schools have great admissions blogs, like MIT and University of Pennsylvania, two of the best admissions blogs that are out there, and gives you a lot of really practical insight and information, not just about those schools, but about the whole process. But you can also look at non-official channels, right? A lot of clubs and student organizations will have their own socials, so you can get a sense of what those feel like. And then there's amateur content, whether that's a student at the school, like ranting and raving about the food, or somebody who went on a tour and uploaded, some clips of their tour to TikTok. You can use all of that to try to, glean a sense of what is it like on campus. There are services that have created virtual tours, whether that's like a 3D virtual tour or a video that you watch. But I like to share this one. One of my students was really having trouble engaging with the research until she figured out she could just look at Google Street View to pretend she was walking around this campus to see how far it was or how long it was from, where the dorms are to where the building where her classes would be, or what that, main commercial street looks like that has all the bars and restaurants that's off campus. What does that really look like? And, she didn't get a sense of like the energy, but she really was able to picture the campus in her mind that way. So lots of ways to do that, even if you can't travel. Megan, great question. It is not overkill at all to use these, even if you can travel. Actually, I encourage all of our students to do these before they go on a visit, because then they have some specific things to look for, right? Was this just really shiny and pretty on the marketing video that the college created? Or what does this gym look like in real life, right? So I think it's great. You should definitely do this, demonstrate your interest, go to campus, like do all the things if you can do them. Great question, Megan. All right. As we kind of round it out here, I want to bring us back to why do visits matter? I hope you can see now why you can't just say, oh, we're going to go see, these 4 colleges without any real strategy or goals in mind. This is really going to help you and your kid get the most out of these visits, learn what really matters to both of you or all of you, get on the same page about that, have real conversations about that. It's going to help their admissions chances at schools that track demonstrated interest, and it's going to help them have an easier time preparing their application materials and having better application materials, because they're going to have all of these sort of unique things to pull on, and authentic experiences to pull on. Which brings me to my last slide. You need a strategy. You need a strategy. You can't just be like, okay, whatever, we're just waltzing through this with our eyes closed. Visits are important, but they're certainly not everything. This is a really small part of building a list, but the list is super important. So that visit strategy needs to cohere with your overall application strategy, right? Where are you visiting? Why are you visiting? What are you looking at? Who are you trying to meet? What are we trying to capture so that we can come back and write great essays or be prepared for an interview? And part of this, parents, you're here because you want this information. Many of you are probably taking notes. You guys are ready, but are your kids? Are your kids engaged? Are they on board? Are they going to communicate with you? This is a highly collaborative process, and certainly the way we approach it at Signet, we want this to be a process of personal growth for them. This is so complicated and it's very high stakes, right? So we're not going to let them do it on their own. That's why you're here. But we do want them to be learning the skills to be able to manage this kind of project, this kind of life decision on their own with your help. And as they grow, as they go off to college, they're going to start making these decisions on their own, right? But this is a great time to practice all of that stuff. But it's really hard to do that with your own kid. They're at an age where they don't want to listen to you. They don't want to talk to you. They think, even if you were a college consultant, they'd be like, well, whatever, mom, you don't know what you're talking about, right? And half the time when I'm talking to a student, it's something that a parent has already said to them. But what I want to show you here in these text, this very long text. This came from a student of mine this week. She came out to California to visit Loyola Marymount and UC Santa Barbara, and then she's going to UC San Diego, I think tomorrow. This text was 3 scrolls on my phone. It's very detailed. There's some inaccuracies in it. She like got some details wrong. But she's really sharing with me what she liked and what she didn't like. She's giving me details that I can actually take and apply to the rest of her list. Telling her, you're going to see some of this stuff at San Diego, but let's see if the vibe is different. What do you think she said to her mom, who was on these tours with her? It's fine, mom. I don't know. But clearly she knew some stuff and she just didn't want to tell her mom about it. Right. And that could be the benefit of having someone like me or Holly in the mix. Your kids are going to talk to us. We're really good at like just not having I mean, we don't know them the way you know them. So we just don't have the history and the baggage. And they're, just more willing to listen to us a little bit than their own parents. All right. That's what I got for you. We're going to move into Q&A. We do have 13 minutes. We can go a little over if you guys need it. Please feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. I am just scrolling up to get to some of the questions we didn't answer. And while I'm doing that, you see our lovely orange arrow. We always start with a free consultation. You can scan this QR code and get taken to a calendar, book a call, and wherever you are at in this process, even if you're not even worried about college yet, and this is more about we got to do well on the AP exams that are coming up in 2 weeks, we will help you through wherever you are, give you some information that you can use right away. And if tutoring or a service makes sense, we will talk to you about what that looks like. So please feel free to schedule that call. All right, so I'm scrolling back up to Lisa's question. I know that there were some very helpful comments in the chat that kind of addressed this, but Holly, I wanted to get your take on this. If you have an elite athlete, how much credence should you place on athletic rigor versus academics?
I'd say track both. So if your athlete might be recruited, that's like a whole separate process that is about making a match, and you may know about, and it's a very high stakes match. But if it works out, you'll have sort of a pretty strong assurance that your student would get in. They'll likely apply early and be committed early, and then that will be decided very early in the application cycle. Often that's up in the air for a very long time, and people may wait for an assurance. They may be wooed, and there can just be a lot of factors, and that can be really, really difficult for students because they've worked so hard for this, and there's so much at stake. So I really recommend students that are planning to go through this process and with recruitment to still develop a list of schools that they would absolutely love to attend if recruitment were part of the picture. Right. And it's part of, I think, it helps tame sort of anxiety and uncertainty to know that you have several life paths open to you that are exciting and very real, even if you really desperately want one. And there's something that feels like a wonderful fit. So I encourage people to, even if recruitment's on the horizon, and it would be only one school you applied to and you had the assurance of getting in, to still develop a full list of schools, and to do plenty of research on schools that are likely to overlap in both, have the athletic rigor that you would want at the level you would want, do the research, reach out to the coaches, do due diligence to try and get that relationship started that might lead to recruitment, but also really think about what life would look like if that didn't happen, if an injury happened, or or maybe they decide that they don't want to participate as well, or you have far more options open when you've planned for that in advance, and it's less devastating to deal with.
That's great, Holly. I'll add that I have a lot of students who are really committed to their sport, but are not so sure about being a full-time student athlete, right? At the college, like you think they're busy now. At the college level, woo, athletes, have no free time, right? It's very, very structured. And, they're traveling across the country, sometimes to other countries, for games and tournaments. And it can really take a toll on their academics. But I've had a couple of students who realize they maybe start the recruiting process and then they're like, actually, I just want to play club. That feels like I will still get to play this thing that I love, but it won't take over my life. So, there are a lot of branches from a sport. It's not always recruitment, right? And so having a broader mind about what are we looking for when we're looking at this school can be really helpful in emphasizing you've got a lot of choices here and you don't have to lock yourself into one path. Great. Holly, I'm going to make you answer this one too. If visiting schools during summer break, what are some helpful tips to get the most out of the visit during a less active time?
I thought the tips that you brought up for if you can't visit are perfect as well, right? You can do some supplementary work. So just sort of being aware that if you go during summer, it depends on how active. Like if a school has a very active like summer programs, and sometimes the campus is a host to a lot of different activities, it may still feel bustling. Those just won't be the normal student population during the regular year. Um, but if you know that's what you're sort of missing, right? Like you still have questions about um, yeah, sort of like logistics of like getting around, finding your way around as a freshman, or those kind of things, then asking for the admission, if admissions can connect you with a student, you can ask those things more directly. So I think if summer is the best time to travel and you're going to be more relaxed and it's not like, you know, it's less stressful, then that may be the best choice because the student can actually engage and talk a little more. You just might want to supplement by asking some of those additional questions.
Great. Sandy, you have such a good question here about your daughter who is obsessed with the acceptance rate. What do you recommend saying to a student who thinks a high acceptance rate means a worse school? We keep telling her that's the wrong stat to look at, except for your chances. Well, I think that's a really common perspective among students and parents, right? If it's really selective, it's really hard to get to, then only the smartest kids must get there. And so it must be the best school, right? But one of the things that I'll say to this is that judging a school's quality on their acceptance rate is it's like a popularity contest, right? Because acceptance rate can and is absolutely manipulated to create that impression, right? I'm not going to name names, but there is a certain school in the Northeast that has really been gaming the system over the last couple of years that now has a 5% acceptance rate. But when most of us were applying to college, the acceptance rate was like in the 70s or 80s. And they had a president who said, we are going to crack into the top 100 of US news. And the way we're going to do that is by getting more students to apply and rejecting more students and gaming our acceptance rate. And they've done it. And now, they have a 5% acceptance rate. It is a great school. It has always been a great school, but now it has that signifier of low acceptance rate. So, they're going to kind of claim that spot. I think this, for me, is really a sign of a student who doesn't have their own goals, their own definition of success, and they really care about what other people think, right? Now, if we're at the end of junior year, there might not be a lot of time to work on that kind of mindset, but that's absolutely the approach that we would take at Signet is, all right, let's erase all brands. What do you really want? What do you want to learn? What comes after college for you? What kind of people is it important for you to be around in terms of your values? What kind of impact do you want to have on the world? Let's create a definition of success from that and think about where are there gaps? What are the things you need to learn? What's the network you need to build in order to have that life? Now, what schools can do that for you? And you're going to apply to some schools that have low acceptance rates, and you're going to apply to some that have higher acceptance rates. But we know every single one of them is going to fill that gap for you and enable the life. Holly, you've been saying this phrase, life path. Enable the life path that you're imagining for yourself right now, and maybe open up new paths that you would never even thought of, right? So it is a little touchy-feely, but this is a mindset thing. This is not like a, let me show you all the data and change your mind kind of question. Would you add anything to that, Holly?
Not really. I mean, I would also say just to stab the acceptance rate a little more, it's not always a good measure of selectivity either. Right? Like it's I don't know. It's about how like the strength of their marketing and how many people are applying. And so it's just one of those numbers. Even though we track it, it can so easily be manipulated that it's not the most useful thing to look at.
All right, we got one more question here from Kunjal. How do self-guided tours differ from guided tours? Are they tracked any differently? What should be the approach to ask questions before, during, or after? And what are the top few things to look for on a tour if you were to make a checklist? Well, Kunjal, first I'll say you are going to get a checklist. You are welcome to add to that checklist, but we're not going to cover that here because we're sending you one. I will start by saying self-guided tours are a little different. I like them. You can still register for a self-guided tour, right? Sometimes you have to put your contact information in and then they'll send you the PDF of the map they want you to take, or sometimes there's an audio tour, right? So you still have to kind of engage officially. I think they can be great because you can really spend time where you want to spend time. And I didn't say this earlier, but Holly was kind of laughing about it. I like to go and just see what buildings are open. I'm like tugging on door handles to see what I can see. I go on tours with students whenever they're in, my local area. I'll meet them at a college and we'll just go do the tour. And yeah, we'll follow students into a building if the door is normally locked. We'll hang out outside of the cafeteria and we'll ask people, oh, well, how was your food? Like, do you usually eat here? Do you eat off campus? It can be really embarrassing, but we're getting really good information. And you can still do all of those things on a self-guided tour. You don't have a tour guide kind of ushering you from one place to the other, right? So you get to do the thing. But the thing that you're going to miss is that impression that tour guide creates. And that may be a good thing, right? Some tour guides are real duds and some of them are super engaging and electric and happen to be majoring in the thing that your kid is interested in, right? That can really boost the impression your kid gets of a school. But if they feel like this is not a person that they would ever talk to in the real world, then maybe they're checked out, right? So you do want to make sure that you talk to real students, either while you're doing this self-guided tour or sometime after, to make sure you're still getting that. Holly, would you add anything to that? No. Okay, let's see here. Great. Well, I think that's all of our questions, unless anybody has any others. Again, you're welcome to come off of chat or put it in the chat. But look out in your email, the email that you registered with, you're going to get the replay of this session in case you missed a little at the beginning or want to show something to a partner or your child. And then you will also get that toolkit that has the organizer and the visit checklist and the preferences worksheet, which I hope will be very, very helpful to you. Our next session will be on college essays. We're going to tackle the personal statement in May. I think it's May 22nd. So look out for that. And hopefully we'll see you at another one of these soon. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Holly, for joining us.